She laughed softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You promised to marry me someday. Her words sounded playful, but they carried something heavier beneath them. I forced a small smile. Do childhood promises matter? For a moment, neither of us moved. The lobby of Orion Tech gleamed around us, glass walls, marble floors, polished smiles. It was the kind of place where emotions were hidden behind performance reviews and quarterly targets. Ariba didn't belong to this world of silent competition and calculated ambition. She belonged to narrow streets where neighbors knew each other's struggles, where promises were simple and meant to be kept. We had grown up in the same neighborhood. When we were 10, I had given her a cheap plastic ring I won at a school fair. The other boys had laughed, calling it childish. But I had stood in front of her and said, "One day I'll marry you." Then no one will laugh. Back then, protecting her felt natural. Life was uncomplicated, but life does not stay uncomplicated. I left the neighborhood after winning a scholarship. She stayed behind. Her father's sudden death forced her to leave college and take small jobs to support her mother and younger brother. While I built presentations and reports in air-conditioned offices, she was building resilience. Now she stood in front of me with a visitor's badge clipped to her modest handbag. I didn't know you worked here, she said. I didn't know you were applying here, I replied. I didn't want to ask you for help, she added quickly, as if reading my thoughts. If I get this job, I want it to be mine. That was Ariba, pride wrapped in humility. I nodded. You won't need help, just be yourself. She smiled, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Hope mixed with fear is a fragile thing. What she didn't know was that Orion Tech was standing on unstable ground. 2 weeks earlier, while reviewing quarterly expense reports, I noticed irregularities. Vendor payments that didn't match services rendered. Invoices that looked duplicated. Approval signatures that felt copied. I stayed late for 3 nights cross-checking numbers. The pattern became clear. Funds were being redirected through shell vendors. It wasn't a minor accounting error. It was fraud. And every trail led to one name, Mr. Cameron, our department head. Cameron was respected, feared, and politically connected within the company. He spoke about loyalty more than performance. He liked employees who didn't ask questions. When I approached him privately with my concerns, he didn't seem surprised. He leaned back in his leather chair and lit a cigarette, ignoring the office rules. You're ambitious, he said calmly. That's good. But ambition needs direction. These numbers don't align, I insisted. He smiled slightly. Sometimes numbers are adjusted for strategic flexibility. That's not flexibility. That's misrepresentation. He tapped ash into a crystal tray. You're up for promotion next quarter, senior operations lead, big salary jump. Don't sabotage yourself over technicalities. Technicalities, millions of rupees labeled as technicalities. I left his office with a storm inside me. At home, my mother was waiting for my call. The landlord had increased rent again. Medical bills were stacking up. That promotion wasn't luxury, it was stability. Exposing Cameron would mean risking everything. Staying silent would mean becoming like him. The morning of Ariba's interview arrived in the middle of that moral battle. She walked into the conference room wearing a simple light blue suit. No expensive accessories, no artificial confidence, just preparation. Cameron unexpectedly joined the interview panel. That alone made me uneasy. She answered every question with clarity. When asked about handling pressure, she didn't give textbook lines. When you don't have the option to quit, she said calmly, you learn to endure and improve. Her honesty shifted the atmosphere. After she stepped out, the panel exchanged looks. Strong communication, one manager admitted. Quick learner, another added. Cameron closed the evaluation file. Not a fit. The room went quiet. Her test score was among the highest, I said carefully. He looked at me, not at the file. Cultural alignment matters. We need people who understand loyalty. The word loyalty hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't about her qualifications. This was about me. He knew she was connected to me. He knew I had seen the financial discrepancies. He was sending a message. That evening, I met Ariba on the rooftop of our old building. The city lights flickered in the distance. They said they'll inform me, she said, staring at the sky. They won't, I replied honestly. She didn't cry, she didn't complain. She just nodded slowly, absorbing disappointment like someone used to carrying weight silently. Maybe it wasn't meant for me, she said softly. It was, I replied, anger creeping into my voice. You deserved it, she looked at me then, really looked at me. You always hated injustice, she said. Even in school, I remembered standing between her and a group of boys who mocked her worn-out shoes. I had been smaller than them, but I hadn't moved. Now the bullies wore suits and held authority. Do childhood promises matter? She asked again. This time I understood. She wasn't asking about marriage. She was asking whether the boy who once chose courage over comfort still existed. That night, sleep avoided me. I thought about promotion letters, salary increments, my mother's medicine bills. Then I thought about Cameron's calm smile when he dismissed Ariba. Silence would secure my future. Speaking up would protect my integrity. Kindness isn't always about soft gestures. Sometimes it demands risk. The next morning, I opened my laptop before sunrise. I organized every document, emails, transaction histories, vendor registrations. I wrote a detailed anonymous complaint to the company's ethics committee. My hands trembled before pressing send. Once done, there was no turning back. At the office, Cameron called me in. "You look tired," he said casually. "Long night," I replied. He studied me carefully as if sensing something had shifted. "Remember," he said, lighting another cigarette, "in this company, people who survive are those who understand which battles to fight." I met his gaze steadily. And for the first time, I didn't look away. The email reached the ethics committee before noon. By afternoon, the atmosphere inside Orion Tech had changed. It was subtle at first, whispers near the coffee machine, senior managers walking faster than usual, doors closing more often than they opened. An internal audit team arrived without announcement. Cameron pretended nothing was wrong. He conducted meetings as usual, approved files, even cracked jokes, but the cigarette smoke in his office grew thicker. When he called me in that evening, his calm mask had small cracks. "You've been unusually quiet," he said, watching me closely. "I'm focused on work," I replied. He leaned forward. "Good. Because distractions can destroy promising careers." I didn't respond. 2 days later, the auditors requested system access logs and vendor contracts. They weren't guessing anymore. They were verifying. Rumors spread quickly. Some employees speculated about tax issues. Others whispered about layoffs. No one dared say the word fraud out loud. Then HR sent a formal email, "Mr. Cameron was being placed on temporary leave pending investigation." Shock rippled through the department. People who once praised his leadership now avoided mentioning his name. Loyalty in corporate corridors has an expiry date. By the end of the week, the results were undeniable. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, personal accounts linked indirectly to project funds. The numbers were too large to ignore. The board held an emergency meeting. I was called in. The conference room felt colder than usual. Senior executives studied me with unreadable expressions. "We understand you raised concerns earlier this quarter," one of them said. "Yes," I replied steadily. "Why didn't you escalate immediately?" "I wanted to be sure," I answered. "Accusations without proof destroy trust." Silence followed. Then the chairman spoke. "Integrity is rare. We need stability. Until a permanent replacement is appointed, you'll act as department head." The promotion came not as a reward, but as responsibility. When I stepped out of that room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt aware that doing the right thing doesn't erase consequences. Some colleagues congratulated me, others looked at me with suspicion. "He must have planned this," I overheard someone whisper. Corporate betrayal leaves scars on everyone, not just the guilty. That evening, I checked the recruitment files. Ariba's application had been officially rejected. Her evaluation scores were among the top 3. I reopened the process. HR hesitated at first. "The list was finalized." "It was finalized under compromised leadership," I replied calmly. "Reassess on merit." Within days, her offer letter was prepared. When I called her, she didn't answer immediately. She returned the call later, her voice cautious. "They sent me an email," she said. Yes, there was a pause. "Did you do this?" I corrected something, I replied. "That's all. I told you I didn't want charity." "This isn't charity," I said firmly. "You earned it. The system failed you." "That's different." Silence lingered on the line. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." She joined the company the following Monday. The first few weeks weren't easy. Some employees assumed she was favored. Others watched her closely, waiting for mistakes. But Ariba didn't react to gossip. She arrived early, left late, asked questions without ego, and accepted feedback without defensiveness. When a major client presentation went wrong due to a data error from another team, she stayed overnight to rebuild the entire analysis, though it wasn't her responsibility. The next morning, the client renewed their contract. No announcement credited her, no applause followed, but I knew, slowly perceptions shifted, respect replaced suspicion. One evening, months later, we stood again on a rooftop, this time the company terrace after successfully launching a high-stakes project. City lights stretched endlessly below us. "You look different," she said. "How?" "Calmer." "Maybe because I'm no longer choosing between fear and conscience," I replied. She smiled faintly. When they rejected me, I thought maybe that childhood promise was just a joke. It was childish, I admitted. It wasn't about marriage, she said gently. It was about knowing someone would stand beside me when things were unfair. Her words carried the weight of years. Corporate life had taught me strategies, negotiation skills, risk management. But it was that simple childhood instinct to stand in front of someone being treated unfairly that defined who I truly was. I can't promise the future, I said honestly. Life changes people, she nodded. I don't need a promise about forever. She looked toward the busy office floors behind us. I just needed proof that kindness survives success. In that moment, I understood something deeper. Unexpected heroes don't always wear confidence loudly. Sometimes they sit quietly in meetings, choosing ethics over advancement. Sometimes they risk comfort so someone else can keep dignity. Cameron eventually faced legal consequences. News traveled, then faded. The company recovered, projects moved on, but what stayed was the shift in culture. Employees began reporting concerns without fear. Transparency policies tightened. Decisions were documented clearly. No one officially credited me for initiating that change. And that was fine. Being a silent hero means accepting that impact matters more than recognition. Months later, during an annual review, the chairman remarked, "Your leadership stabilized more than numbers. It restored trust." Trust, that was the real achievement. On our way out of the office one evening, Ariba laughed again, lighter this time. "So," she teased, "do childhood promises matter?" I smiled. "They matter if they shape who you become." She didn't ask anything more. We walked out into the night, not as children bound by a plastic ring, and not as adults chasing a fairy tale ending, but as two people who had learned that kindness is not weakness, integrity is not naivety, and standing up quietly can change more than shouting loudly ever could. In a world where betrayal often climbs faster than honesty, choosing fairness is an act of courage. Childhood promises may not guarantee love stories, but they can plant the seed of character. And character, once tested, becomes the strongest promise of all.